The morning I was supposed to take command of the range, the man who ran the armory handed me the smallest rifle on the rack and told me not to drop it. I had gotten to the installation early, before the sun had cleared the tree line, because I wanted to see the place the way it ran when no one important was watching. That is a habit I learned a long time ago from a man who is in this story later. You do not learn a range from the office. You learn it from the firing line at 0700, when the coffee is bad and the targets are still damp and the sailors think nobody is grading them yet. So I parked my car by the fence, put my reporting packet in a canvas bag over my shoulder, and walked down to the armory in civilian clothes. Jeans, a gray jacket, nothing that told anyone who I was, because that was the point. The armory issue window was a long counter under a metal roof with weapons racked behind it, and a chief standing at the register, the way chiefs stand everywhere, like the counter belonged to him, and I was a guest in his house. He was heavy through the shoulders, close to my age, with a voice built for talking over engines. 2 young sailors leaned near him, laughing at something he had said. I had heard 1,000 versions of that laugh in 23 years, and I knew before he opened his mouth that some of it was going to land on me. "Help you?" he said. He did not say ma'am. He looked at the canvas bag and the jeans and made a decision about me in the time it takes to blink. "I'd like to draw a weapon and walk the line," I said. "I want to see how the relay runs this morning." He smiled the way you smile at a child who has wandered somewhere they should not be. "The line," he said. "You want to see the line?" "That's right." He turned to the 2 sailors like I had told a joke he needed help enjoying. "You hear that? She wants to see the line." Then back to me, elbows on the counter, patient and cruel in the easy way that does not think of itself as cruel. "Sweetheart, this is a live qualification range. Real steel. You're looking for the Family Services building. It's back up the hill by the commissary. They do the ID cards and the spouse orientation up there." "I'm in the right place," I said. Something in how I said it should have warned him. It did not. He reached back to the rack, and instead of the service rifle every sailor on that line was shooting, he took down a short, training carbine, the smallest thing he had, a stubby little weapon they kept for the shortest recruits and the open house days when they let civilians feel what it was like to hold one. He set it on the counter and slid it across to me with 2 fingers, like he was doing me a favor. "A wife with a rifle? Adorable," he said. The 2 sailors laughed. "Try not to drop it, sweetheart. Better yet, why don't you go wait in the car? Your husband can tell you all about it when he's done being a real one of us." I looked at the little carbine on the counter. I had carried heavier things than a rifle across worse ground than this, and I had carried them for people who never got to walk off the range at all. I said nothing because saying nothing was the discipline that had kept me standing through years of rooms exactly like this one. I picked up the small weapon. It weighed almost nothing in my hands. I turned and walked toward the firing line, and behind me I heard the chief say, low to his sailors, "Watch! This is going to be good." He was right about that part. It was going to be good. He was just wrong about who it was going to be good for. His name, I would learn from the placard on his shirt when I got close enough, was Chief Gunner's mate, Prewitt, Dale Prewitt. I want to be fair to him, because this is a story about what I decided to do with a man who was wrong about me, and you cannot judge that decision unless you see him clearly. He was not a monster. He was a competent chief who ran a clean armory and had decided, in the 4 seconds it took me to walk up to his counter, that he already knew everything about the woman in front of him. That is the whole of it. That is the entire wound. He looked at the surface of me and believed the surface was the depth. The carbine was set up for someone else. The sling was cinched short for a small frame, the sight adjusted for a recruit 0. The whole thing wrong for my arms and my eye. My hands fixed it without asking me. I loosened the sling 1 notch, then another, seated the stock into my shoulder to feel the length of pull, ran my thumb down to check the selector, tipped the rear sight to read where the last shooter had left it. I did all of that walking without looking down, the way you finish a sentence in your first language while your mind is on something else entirely. It is not a skill you can fake, and it is not a skill you can forget. It lives in the tendons. The reporting packet was in my bag against my hip. My name was on the top line of the first page, and under it my billet, and under that, the date I was to assume it, which was that day. Chief Warrant Officer, 3, Adrian Vale. Officer in charge, small arms, marksmanship, range. I did not take it out. I have never liked winning an argument with paper. Paper is what you use when you have nothing else, and I had something else. I had the line, and I had my hands, and I had a target coming down the range that did not care what I was wearing. One of the young sailors, a lean kid with a fresh haircut, watched me settle the little carbine into my shoulder at the ready line, and I saw his laugh die in his throat. He nudged the other one. He did not know what he was seeing. He only knew that the way I was holding the weapon did not match the story the chief had told about me, and the mismatch made him uneasy, the way a wrong note makes you uneasy before you can name it. "Chief," the kid said quietly, "look at how she's holding it." Prewitt did not look. He was busy being right. I set the sights. I breathed out slow the way I had been taught by a man I had not seen in 15 years, and I waited my turn on the line, a warrant officer in blue jeans with a toy rifle, while a range full of sailors decided what they thought they knew about me. I want to take you back, before the target came down, because you cannot understand why I did not simply flatten Chief Prewitt where he stood, unless you understand what the range meant to me and why I could not hate a man for underestimating it. Everything I knew about a rifle and about breathing between heartbeats and about the terrible arithmetic of a good shot, I learned first as a sport and then as something much heavier than a sport. There was a before and there was an after, and the line between them was a night in the spring of 2008 that I do not talk about at parties. I enlisted at 18 in 2003, straight out of a town where the choices were the plant, the community college, or the recruiter's office, and the recruiter's office had air conditioning. I became a gunner's mate because the rating had the word gun in it, and I had grown up shooting cans off a fence post with my grandfather's .22, and I thought that was a reason. It turned out to be a better reason than most people's. I had an eye. That is not bragging. Some people can carry a tune without training, and some people can throw a ball to a spot without thinking about it, and I could put a bullet where I was looking. It is a small, strange gift, and by itself, it is worth almost nothing. What you do with it is everything. In 2005, a Master Chief named Emmett Rausch saw me shoot at a base match and pulled me onto the Navy rifle team. And for 2 years, he took my small, strange gift apart and rebuilt it into something disciplined. Rausch was a hard, dry, patient man who had shot for the Navy since before I was born, and he did not praise anyone, ever, because he believed praise made you soft in the exact places you needed to stay hard. When you did something right, he simply said the target's score and moved on. When you did something wrong, he told you what you did and why. Once, and if you did it again, he stopped talking to you for the rest of the day, which was worse than any yelling. He gave me the call sign the team used for me, the one you write in the spotting log so you do not have to write the whole name every string. He called me Kestrel, after the little falcon that hangs dead, still in a high wind, and then drops on exactly the thing it was watching. I was proud of that name, in a way I have rarely been proud of anything, because Rausch did not hand out names. And this one he had chosen himself, and it meant he had watched me hold still in the wind. Those 2 years on the team were the hardest schooling of my life, and I include a war in that comparison on purpose. Rausch believed that a shot was not a moment but a chain, and that if any link in the chain was weak, the whole thing failed, and so he made me build the chain link by link 1,000 times until it did not need me to think about it. Position, natural point of aim, breath, the still place at the bottom of the breath, the press, straight back, surprising even yourself, the follow-through, the sight staying on the target after the round was gone, because how you finish a shot is how you begin the next one. He would stand behind me for an entire afternoon and say almost nothing, and then, once, quietly, he would tell me the one thing I had done wrong, and I would carry that one thing home and turn it over all night. People think marksmanship is about the eye. It is not. It is about the parts of you that want to flinch and want to rush and want to be told you did well, and learning to set every one of those wanting parts down before you touch the trigger. Rausch taught me to set them down. It is the most useful thing anyone ever taught me, and I have used it in rooms that had no rifles in them at all, rooms exactly like the one at the Armory window, where the thing that wanted to flinch and rush and be vindicated had to be set down before I could see clearly. Then, in 2007, the Navy sent me. One sailor pulled out of a rating and dropped alone into an Army rotation to a forward operating location as an individual augmentee to run small arms training and stand-based defense. And that is where I met a 19-year-old named Danny Ostrander. Danny was a supply kid, a petty officer 3rd class, who could not shoot to save his life when he arrived, and he was terrified of the range and terrified of the perimeter and terrified mostly of dying somewhere his mother would not understand. They sent him to me to get qualified because I was the augmentee who knew rifles, And over about 6 weeks, I taught him to breathe between his heartbeats, to press the trigger instead of yanking it, to stop flinching against the recoil before it even came. He got good. Not team good, just good enough, which at a forward base is the only kind of good that matters. And he made me laugh, which almost no one at that place did, because he called the rifle Miss Adrienne in a prim little voice, like the weapon was a stern schoolteacher he was trying to win over. The base was a hard, ugly, dust-colored place, all gravel and plywood and heat that sat on you like a hand, and the range there was a berm scraped out of the desert with a few crooked target frames. Nothing like the clean lanes I had shot on with the team. But the arithmetic was the same, and the still place at the bottom of the breath was the same, and I found that I could teach a frightened boy to reach it. That was a revelation to me. On the team, I had learned to reach the still place myself. On that gravel berm, I learned I could carry someone else to it, that I could stand behind a 19-year-old whose hands were shaking and talk him down into the quiet one breath at a time, and that when he got there, his hands stopped shaking and the round went where he was looking, and he would turn around with a look on his face like the world had just told him a secret. Those 6 weeks were the first time I understood that the gift was not really the eye at all. The gift was the ability to give the quiet away. Danny wanted, more than he wanted to be brave, to not let anyone down. He told me once, cleaning his rifle in the plywood shade, that his older brother had been a Marine and that his father talked about the brother like the sun rose out of him, and that Danny had joined the Navy partly to get out from under that light and partly, he admitted, to earn a little of it for himself. He was the kind of kid who apologized when you corrected him, who flinched at his own mistakes before you could even name them, and over those weeks I watched the flinch leave him, watched him stand a little straighter each time a target came back with his work centered on it. He started to believe he belonged on the line. That is the thing I gave him, and the thing I have never entirely forgiven myself for. Because belonging on the line is what kept him standing in his sector instead of running on the night the line was the worst place in the world to be standing. "If I miss petty officer," he told me once, grinning over the sights, "you tell my mom I hit." "You're not going to miss," I said. "Miss Adrienne won't let you." I have thought about that exchange more times than I can count. I was 23 and I believed it. I believed that if you taught someone well enough and they breathed right and they held still in the wind would not take them. It is a beautiful thing to believe, and it is not true. And the night I stopped believing it was the night the perimeter came apart. I am not going to tell you all of it. Some of it is mine, and I am keeping it. I will tell you that it came in the dark, that it came from 3 sides at once, that the first crack of it was so close it did not sound like fire so much as the air itself splitting. I will tell you that I ran to my sector because that is what you do, and that I put my rifle on the wire and did the terrible arithmetic I had trained my whole life for, and that for a stretch of minutes that felt like a single held breath, I was very, very good at the worst job in the world. I held my sector. The people behind me lived because I held it. And Danny Ostrander, who I had taught to breathe between heartbeats, was in the next sector over, and he did not. They gave me a medal for that night, a bronze star with the small bronze letter V on it that means the thing was done under fire, done for real, not at a desk. I wore it because you are supposed to, and because refusing it would have made a scene, but I have never once looked at it without hearing a prim little voice call a rifle Miss Adrienne, and I would have traded the medal and the call sign and the record with my name on it that I had not even set yet to hear that voice one more time. That is the arithmetic no one trains you for. You cannot get good enough to make it come out even. You only get good enough to carry more of the weight. So when I stood on that firing line in 2026, 41 years old, in blue jeans, holding a toy rifle a chief had handed me as a joke, and the whole range was waiting to laugh, I was not thinking about Chief Prewitt at all. I was thinking about how strange it is that the same hands that failed to save a boy can be the most trusted hands on a base, and how the world will look at those hands and see a wife who wandered in from the commissary. I was not angry. Anger was a long way behind me. I was just very, very tired of being handed the smallest thing on the rack. That was when Emmett Rausch turned around. I did not know he was there. He had retired years before, a master chief with more shooting badges than the wall could hold, and he had come back the way old range coaches always come back, as a civilian contractor, teaching marksmanship to sailors who had no idea they were being taught by a legend. He had been down at the far end of the line, crouched behind a young shooter, calling wind. And some sound, my voice maybe, or just the particular way a body I had trained moves, reached him, and he stood up from his crouch and turned around and looked down the line at me. I watched it happen on his face. The confusion first, because I was in the wrong clothes in the wrong decade. Then the recognition, arriving all at once the way it does when you see a face you have not seen in 15 years, and your whole body remembers before your mind catches up. His mouth opened. And Emmett Rausch, who did not hand out praise, who told you your score and moved on, who had not raised his voice on a range in 40 years, said one word, quietly, and the quiet of it was what made it carry. Kestrel. One word. I had not heard it spoken aloud in years, and the whole line went as still as a held breath. It was not loud. That is the thing people never believe when I tell it. He did not shout it. He said it the way you say a name in a church. But a firing line is a quiet place already, everyone half deaf and listening hard through their ear protection for the commands. And the word traveled the length of it in the silence between strings and landed on every sailor there. They did not know what it meant. They only knew that the old contractor, who never spoke unless he was correcting your trigger press, had just looked at the woman with the toy rifle and said something like a prayer. Chief Prewitt's grin was still on his face, but it had stopped meaning anything. It was just an arrangement of his mouth now, hanging there while the ground moved under him, and I watched him look from Rausch to me to the small carbine in my hands and understand that he had gotten something badly wrong without yet understanding what. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Chief Prewitt did what a competent man does when the floor tilts. He tried to reset it. "All right," he said, loud, clapping his hands once. "Everybody back on the line. Show's over. Range coaches like a joke, huh, Emmett?" He laughed, and it came out wrong, a half-second late, aimed at Rausch like a rope thrown to a man he hoped would catch it. "You know how these old guys are. Everybody's a legend to them." Rausch did not catch the rope. He did not even look at Prewitt. He was still looking at me, and there was something on his hard, dry face I had seen exactly once before, on the day I made the team, a thing that on any other man would have been a smile. "Chief," he said, without turning his head, and his voice had gone flat and cold in a way the young sailors would not have understood, but I did. "You want to be careful what you handed her." Prewitt's laugh guttered out. The two young sailors had stopped enjoying themselves. They were looking at me now with the particular alarm of people who have laughed at something and just realized they do not know what it was. I felt the whole line tilt toward me, 20 sets of eyes, waiting to be told how to feel, and I understood that I was being handed a choice and that I had about 4 seconds to make it. Because here is what was true in that moment. I could have ended Chief Dale Prewitt right there. I had the reporting packet in my bag with my name and his range's name on the same page. I could have taken it out and read it aloud and let him stand in the wreckage of it in front of the sailors he led, and it would have been justice, clean and total. He had earned it. Every word of it he had earned. There is a version of this story where I do exactly that, and I will not pretend I did not want to, because wanting to is human, and I am human. The small, mean animal in me wanted him to feel, for one long public minute, exactly as small as he had tried to make me feel. But I have spent a long time learning the difference between being proven right and being made whole, and only one of those two things lasts. Being proven right is a firework. It is bright and it is loud and it is over, and it leaves a smell of powder, and a chief who will spend the rest of his career quietly hating the officer who humiliated him in front of his sailors, and a firing line full of young people who learned that the way you handle being wronged is to destroy the person who wronged you the second you get the power to do it. That is not the lesson I wanted to teach on my first morning owning that range. That is not the lesson Rausch taught me, or the one Danny Ostrander died next to, or the one my grandfather taught me with the cans on the fence post. The lesson was always the same. Let the target speak. You do not have to say a word. The target says all of it, and it never lies, and it does not need you to be cruel. So I made my choice, and I made it without a speech, because speeches are just a slower kind of firework. I turned to the young lieutenant who had just come hurrying down from the direction of the quarterdeck, a lieutenant junior grade with a reporting roster in his hand and a confused official look on his face. He had clearly been sent to find someone and could not find them, and he had heard the strange stillness on the range from up the hill and come to see what had broken it. "I'm looking for the incoming officer in charge," he said to the range in general, reading off his clipboard. "Warrant Officer Vale. She was supposed to check in with me at the quarterdeck at 0700. Has anybody seen?" He stopped. He had followed the direction every face on the line was pointed, and it led to me, a woman in blue jeans holding the smallest rifle on the rack, and his official look came apart. "I'm Vale," I said. His name, I would learn, was Lund. Trevor Lund. He looked at me and looked at the little carbine and looked at Chief Prewitt, who had gone a color I can only describe as the color of a man watching a wave he cannot outrun, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Lund did the math faster than the chief had because he had the roster in his hand, and the roster does not make jokes. "Ma'am," he said, and came to a kind of attention he had not planned on. "Ma'am, I've been trying to reach you. The captain's on her way down. She wanted to be here when you assumed the range." "I know," I said. "I came early. I wanted to see it first." I did not look at Prewitt when I said it, and not looking at him was the loudest thing I could have done. He understood. I watched him understand that I had walked into his armory at sunrise on purpose, in plain clothes on purpose, to learn his range from the firing line the way a good gunner always does, and that he had taken one look at me and handed me a toy and told me to wait in the car. He understood that I had let him, and he understood worst of all that I was not going to make him pay for it in the way he had braced himself to pay, which is its own kind of terror, because a punishment you can see coming is a thing you can steel yourself against, and mercy from someone you have wronged is a thing you cannot steel yourself against at all. It just sits on you. I set the reporting packet down on the ready bench without opening it. Then I turned to Emmett Rausch, who had not moved, who was still watching me with that thing on his face that was almost a smile. And I gave him the only order I gave anyone that whole morning. "Master Chief," I said, because a man like that is a Master Chief until the day he dies, no matter what his contractor badge says. "Would you spot for me? 1 string. For old times." Something moved in his jaw. "Thought you'd never ask," he said. "Chief Prewitt," I said, and now I did look at him, and I kept my voice as level and ordinary, as if I were asking him to pass the salt, because level and ordinary was the mercy. "Clear the line for me. I'd like to shoot before I sign for your range." For a moment he didn't move, and I understood the whole war going on inside him, the part that wanted to argue, and the part that knew there was nothing left to argue with. Then the training won, the way it does in good sailors, even on the worst day of their careers. And Chief Dale Prewitt turned to his firing line and called it clear in a voice that had lost every ounce of the ease it had carried 5 minutes before. "Cease fire," he called. "Clear all weapons. Make the line safe. Range is cold." The sailors cleared and grounded and stepped back, and the metal roof was very quiet, and I walked to the firing point with the smallest rifle on the rack, while a range full of people who had been ready to laugh at me watched me kneel down in blue jeans and go to work. I want to be honest about what happened next because it would be easy to make it sound like something out of a movie, and it was not like that. It was quieter than that. It was better than that. The little carbine was a poor weapon, and it was zeroed for a stranger, and I had no time to fix the zero, so I did the thing you do when the tool is wrong. I read the wrongness, and I shot around it. That is what all those years buy you. Not magic. Correction. Rausch settled in behind me and put the spotting scope on the target the way he had 10,000 times, and I heard him breathe out, and the years fell off both of us. I found my natural point of aim. I let the jeans and the chief and the whole watching line go soft and far away. I breathed out, and at the bottom of the breath, in the still place between one heartbeat and the next where Rausch had taught me to live, I pressed the trigger, and the small, ugly rifle did exactly what I told it to. I fired a slow string, not fast. Fast is for people who need to look impressive. I fired it the way you fire when the only thing you are trying to impress is the target, one deliberate round at a time, resetting between each, breathing, finding the still place, pressing. And behind me, in the flat, dry voice that had run through every good day of my shooting life, Master Chief Emmett Rausch called my hits the old way, the way he had called them when I was 20 and hungry, and he was the hardest man I knew. "Center," he said. "Reset, breathe, press." Center, reset, breathe, press. Center, same as it ever was. When the string was done, the range officer ran the target back on the wire, and it came up the line toward us, and the sailors leaned in to see, and there was a single, ragged hole in the middle of it where a group should have been. All the rounds stacked so close they had chewed one wound in the paper instead of many, from a toy carbine, from a stranger's zero, in blue jeans. Nobody clapped. That is the part I love most about a firing line. A range full of civilians would have clapped, but these were shooters, and shooters do not clap at a target like that because clapping is what you do when you are surprised, and what they felt was not surprise. It was the specific silence of people looking at a thing they did not know a human could do, and then looking at the wall behind me where the range record had hung so long that no one read it anymore. A name and a score on a brass plate that had been an anonymous piece of history to every sailor in that building. I had shot that record more than 15 years before, on a proper range with a proper rifle, in the year I could not stop shooting, and the number on the plate was high enough that people who knew rifles had assumed for a decade and a half that it belonged to some legendary chief long since retired, some old team shooter from a black and white era. It had become furniture. It hung on the wall the way the fire extinguisher hung on the wall, a thing nobody looked at because it had always been there. And now a range full of young sailors was looking at it, really looking, reading the name and the number, and then turning to look at the woman in blue jeans who had just carved a single hole in a target with the smallest rifle on the rack. The name on the plate was mine. I watched them read it. I watched the lean kid with the fresh haircut read it and read the target and read me, and I watched the three of those things line up in his head into one impossible fact. The record on the wall had been a stranger's an hour ago. Now it had a face, and the face had walked in at sunrise in blue jeans and been handed the smallest rifle on the rack and told to go wait in the car. And then, through the open end of the range, I saw the staff car turn in at the gate, the small command flag on its fender, and I knew the captain had arrived and that the morning was about to become official, and that Chief Dale Prewitt was about to find out what I had decided to do with him. The staff car stopped at the edge of the range, and Captain Marguerite Halloran got out. I had never met her in person, but I knew her by reputation and by the exchange of messages that had brought me here. She commanded the weapons training organization, and she had asked for me by name for this billet, which is a thing that had meant a great deal to me quietly, and which I had told no one. She was a compact, silver-haired woman who had spent a career being underestimated, for reasons not unlike mine, and she had a way of taking in a whole scene in one pass that told you she had done it 10,000 times. She came onto the range, and the line snapped to attention, and she gave the sailors an easy at ease, and her eyes went to me, and then to the target still hanging on the wire, and then, briefly, unmistakably, to the small carbine in my hands. She missed nothing. I understood at once that she had seen the whole shape of it in 3 seconds. The plain clothes, the toy rifle, the target, the record on the wall, the chief, standing at a rigid, unhappy brace off to the side. She had put it together the way she had put together every hard room of her career. "Warrant Officer Vale," she said, and there was the ghost of something dry and amused under the formality. "I see you got started without me." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I wanted to see the range the way it runs when no one's looking." "And how does it run?" I felt the whole line waiting. I felt Chief Prewitt waiting, braced, certain he knew what came next, because he had told himself the story every wronged man tells himself, the story where the powerful person he insulted is about to do to him exactly what he would do if he had the power, which is to end him. He stood there and waited to be ended. "It runs well, ma'am," I said. "Chief Prewitt keeps a clean armory and a safe line. We had a misunderstanding this morning about who was standing on it. It's handled." There was a silence. Captain Halloran looked at me for a long moment, and then she looked at Chief Prewitt, who had gone very still, and then she looked back at me, and I saw her decide to let me have it my way, which is the greatest professional courtesy one officer can give another. She was giving me my range, all of it, including the part where I got to decide what justice looked like on it. "A misunderstanding," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "I trust it won't recur." "No, ma'am, it won't." "Very well," she said, and the matter was closed, sealed, filed away, and Chief Dale Prewitt stood there in the wreckage of a punishment that had not come, which I promise you is heavier than any punishment that does, because a man who has been destroyed gets to feel wronged. He gets to nurse the grievance, to tell himself the officer was cruel, to make himself the injured party in his own story. I had taken that from Prewitt. I had left him with nothing to hold but the plain fact of what he had done, and the plain fact that I had chosen not to make him pay for it, and there is no comfortable place to stand in that. I knew, because I had stood there myself, years ago, on the other side of someone's mercy, and it had changed me more than any dressing down ever could. Captain Halloran stayed a few minutes, walked the line, exchanged a quiet word with Roush that made the old Master Chief almost smile again, and then she took me aside near her car and did the actual business, the handshake and the words that made me the officer in charge of that range. And then she got back in the staff car and left, and the range was mine, and I sent the sailors back to their qualification, and the morning went on the way mornings do, indifferent to the fact that the ground had moved. Chief Prewitt found me an hour later when the line had a lull. He came up to me the way a man walks to a thing he does not want to reach, and he stood in front of me, and he could not quite make his eyes meet mine, and I let him stand there in it for a moment, because a little of the weight is useful, and too much is cruelty, and knowing the difference is most of the job. "Ma'am," he said, "I owe you." You don't owe me anything, Chief. I handed you. He stopped. I told you to wait in the car. You did. Why didn't you? He gestured helplessly at the whole morning, the target, the record, the captain's car pulling away. You could have ended me right there, in front of my sailors. I'd have deserved it. I thought about how to answer that. I thought about Danny Ostrander, who I had not thought about out loud in front of anyone in years, and about a boy who called a rifle Miss Adrian, and about the terrible arithmetic that no medal ever balances. Because ending, you wouldn't have taught anyone anything except that I could, I said. And I already know I can. I've known a long time. Chief, the whole point of being good at something is so you don't have to be cruel with it. You had a bad 4 seconds this morning. You looked at me and you saw a wife with a rifle and you told a joke. It was a rotten joke and it was wrong, and it's over now. And what you do from here is the only part that matters. Run me a good range. Teach these kids right. And the next time somebody walks up to your window in blue jeans, remember that you have absolutely no idea what they've carried, and hand them the real rifle. He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, ma'am, he said. And this time his eyes came up and held mine, and I saw that it had landed, that whatever else Chief Dale Prewitt was, he was a man who could learn, and that I had bet correctly. Thank you, ma'am. Go run your line, Chief. He went, and he ran it well for the rest of the time I knew him, and he was hard on the sailors who deserved it and patient with the ones who needed it. And he never, as far as I ever saw, handed anyone the small rifle again. A few weeks later, I watched him prove it, without knowing I was watching. A civilian came to the window one slow afternoon, a contractor's wife actually there for a family open house, a nervous woman in a sun hat who had clearly never held a weapon in her life and was half sorry she had come. The old Chief Prewitt, the one from my first morning, would have made a joke. I saw the joke arrive in him. I saw it get as far as his face. And then I saw him put it down, deliberately, the way you set down a thing that is too hot to hold, and instead he came around the counter and walked the woman to a safe lane and knelt beside her and taught her, patiently, with real care, how to hold a rifle for the first time in her life, and when she hit the target, she laughed out loud in surprise, and he grinned at her. And it was a clean grin with nothing cruel in it. He did not know I had seen. I never told him. But I understood in that moment that the mercy had worked the way I had hoped it would, that it had not made him grateful to me so much as it had made him different, and that the difference would outlast me on that range and touch people I would never meet. That is the whole case for mercy, right there. Cruelty only teaches people to be careful around you. Mercy teaches them to be different when you are not there. That evening, after the last relay had cleared and the sailors had gone and the metal roof ticked and cooled in the dusk, I stayed behind on the empty range because there was one more thing I had to do that I could not do in front of anyone. I let myself finish the memory I had cut off that morning. I do that sometimes, deliberately, in a safe place, because a memory you refuse to finish will finish itself in your sleep, and I would rather choose the time. I let myself go back to 2008 and the wire in the dark. I let myself remember not just holding my sector, but the after, the gray dawn, walking to the next sector over, and what I found, and the quiet, and how the quiet of a range at dusk in 2026 is the same quiet, exactly the same, so that 18 years fold up into nothing, and I am 23 again, and a boy I taught to breathe between heartbeats is not breathing at all. They gave me a medal for that night. I have said that already. What I have not said, because I have never said it to anyone, is that the reason I set the range record a year later, the reason I shot the score on the brass plate on the wall, is that after Danny died, I could not stop shooting. I shot the way other people drink. I stood on ranges for hours because on a range there is only the breath and the still place and the target. And in the still place, I did not have to hear a prim little voice. And I got so good in that year of not being able to stop that I set a record no one has broken since. The record on the wall that made a whole firing line go silent is not a monument to my gift. It is a monument to my grief. I have never told anyone that, and I am telling you because you did not laugh at me at the window and you have followed me this far. I took a single spent casing from my pocket, one I had saved from the string I fired that morning from the toy rifle, and I walked to the wall under the brass plate with my name on it, and I set the little brass cylinder on the ledge beneath it, standing upright, the way you leave a stone on a grave. "This one was yours, Danny," I said to the empty range in the ticking dark. "Miss Adrian says you hit." I stood under the plate for a long time. I thought about how the record and the grief were the same object, how I could not point to the number on the wall without also pointing to the boy, and how nobody who admired the record would ever know that. I thought about all the things we hang on walls, the plaques and the photographs and the folded flags, and how every one of them is a number standing in for something that cannot be written down. The sailors who had gone silent that morning thought they had seen a great shooter. What they had actually seen was 18 years of a woman refusing to let a boy be only a name on a casualty list, refusing to let the thing he died beside become a game. They could not have known that. You almost never know, when you are looking at what someone can do, what it costs them to be able to do it. And then I stood there for a while, in the quiet I had earned and did not want, which is the only kind of quiet grief ever gives you. And after a while, I turned off the lights and locked the armory and drove home. The next morning, I took the range for real, in uniform this time, my collar devices catching the early light. And I did a thing that surprised the sailors and steadied them, which is what a good change is supposed to do. Before the first qualification relay of the day, I had them form up, and I told them, in about 6 sentences, who Danny Ostrander was. Not the whole of it, just that he had been a supply kid who learned to shoot, who had stood a perimeter and not come home, and that the first relay of every day on my range would be fired in his name. Because a range is not a sport to me, and I was not going to let it become one on my watch. Then I sent them to the line, and the first shots of my command went downrange for a boy most of them would never hear of again. And it was quiet in the good way, and I saw Chief Priwett standing at the back of the line with his chin down, and I knew he had heard the part of it I did not say out loud. Chief Priwett squared away and changed, stayed my chief, and we ran a good range together, and Master Chief Rausch kept coming back as a contractor because a man like that does not know how to stop teaching, and some mornings he would spot for me on the record line the way he had when I was young, and call my hits in that flat, dry voice, and neither of us ever said out loud what it meant that we had found each other again on a range at the far end of both our careers. We did not need to say it. Shooters do not clap, and we did not talk. We just stood on the line together in the wind, holding still, the way he taught me. We did talk once, that first evening, before I stayed behind alone. After the captain had gone and the sailors had cleared, Rausch found me by the ready bench, and we stood a while not saying much, the way people do who have too much to say. He had gotten old. That was the strange thing to take in. On the team, he had been the fixed point the whole world turned around, and now he was a lean old man in a contractor's polo shirt with reading glasses hanging off his collar. And it hurt something in me to see the years on him. "You never broke the record," he said finally. It was not a question, and it was not praise. It was just the fact, laid down between us the way he laid everything down. "No," I said. "Nobody did. Nobody will." He looked at the plate on the wall and then at me, and something in his hard, dry face eased by a fraction of an inch. "I read about your augmentee tour, the write-up for that night. They sent it around the old team." He was quiet a moment. "I'm sorry about the boy." I had not expected that, and it went through me clean. "You heard about Danny. I heard you held your sector." He let that sit. "And I heard what it cost. Kestrel, I taught a lot of shooters in 40 years. You're the only one I ever worried about, because you were the only one good enough to blame yourself for the wind." He put a dry old hand on my shoulder for exactly 1 second, which from Emmett Rausch was the same as another man weeping. "You did not lose that boy. The night lost that boy. You just happened to be close enough to the truth of it to feel like it was yours. Set it down. You taught me that, remember? Set the wanting parts down before you touch the trigger. Grief's just another part that wants to rush you." I did not answer him, because I could not, and he understood that too, and he took his hand off my shoulder and told me not to stay too late, and he left me alone with the range and the plate and the boy, but I have carried that 1 second of his hand on my shoulder longer than I have carried the medal, and I expect I will carry it to the end. And there was a young sailor, a seaman named Bree Alcott, who came to my range that first week, terrified of the rifle, and half convinced she did not belong on the line because someone somewhere had already handed her a version of the small carbine, told her in 100 small ways that a girl like her was there to fetch coffee and fill a slot and wait in the car. I saw it on her the first morning, the flinch, the apology in her shoulders before she had done anything to apologize for. I knew that flinch. I had worn it once before Rausch stood up behind me and told me to breathe. So I took her onto the line myself, and I did not hand her the small rifle. I handed her the good one, the real one, the service rifle every other shooter on that line was firing, and I saw her surprise at the weight of it, the way being trusted has a weight. "You're not here to fetch anyone's coffee," I told her. You're not here to fill a slot. You're here to shoot. Load. What if I miss, ma'am, she said, and her voice was very small, and I heard a prim little voice under it from 18 years and a whole war ago. Then we fix it and you shoot again, I said. And then you fix it and you shoot again. That's the whole secret. Nobody good was ever born good, and nobody on my range waits in the car. I taught her the way Roush had taught me and the way I had taught a boy on a gravel berm a whole war ago. I stood behind her and talked her down into the quiet one breath at a time. The first day she jerked every shot, anticipating the recoil. Her whole body braced against a thing that had not happened yet, and I made her dry fire for an hour. No ammunition at all, just the press and the click and the sight staying still, until her body stopped bracing for a blow that was not coming. She was frustrated. She wanted to shoot real rounds and prove herself, and I would not let her. And at one point she nearly cried out of pure wanting, and I told her that everyone who was any good had stood exactly where she was standing, wanting to rush, and that learning not to rush was the entire job. The second day I let her load one round at a time, and half of them went where she was looking, and she started to believe. By the fourth day she was loading full magazines, and her hands had stopped apologizing. I taught her to breathe between her heartbeats. I taught her to press the trigger instead of yanking it, to stop flinching against the recoil before it even came, to find the still place at the bottom of the breath and live there for the half second that matters. And over that first week, her groups tightened, the rounds walking in from a scattered handful to a tight little cluster, and the morning her first real group came up on the wire, small and centered and hers. I watched her look at it, and then look at her own hands like she had never seen them before, and I felt something in my chest that I had not felt in a very long time, something that was not grief, or was grief turned all the way around into its other face. She turned to me with the target in her hands, and she could not stop looking at it, and she said quietly, "The way you say a thing you are afraid to believe, I did that." Not a question. She was testing the words to see if they would hold her weight. "You did that," I told her. "Nobody stood in front of the target for you. Nobody breathed for you. That is your work and yours only." And I watched the flinch go out of her shoulders, the same flinch I had carried at her age, the same one I had watched leave a boy on a gravel berm, and I understood that this was the actual point of the whole long chain of it, the record and the grief and the mercy I had shown a chief. It was so that on some ordinary morning I could hand a frightened girl the real rifle and stand behind her while she found out she was more than anyone had told her she was. Master Chief Roush was on the line that morning. He watched Alcott's target come up, and he watched the girl's face, and then he looked over at me, and Emmett Roush, who did not hand out praise, who told you your score and moved on, gave me the smallest nod I have ever received, and it was worth more than the medal and the record and the whole brass plate on the wall. I have thought a great deal, since that morning at the Armory window, about what it means to be handed the smallest thing on the rack. It happens to a lot of us, and not only on ranges. Someone takes one look at the surface of you, at your clothes or your size or your voice or the fact that you came in quiet through the wrong door, and they decide they already know your depth. And they hand you the small thing and tell you not to drop it. It is one of the most ordinary cruelties in the world, and most of the people who do it do not even think of it as cruelty. Chief Prewitt did not. He thought he was being funny. He thought he was protecting his real range from a wife who had wandered in from the commissary. He was wrong about me in every particular, and the maddening thing, the thing I want you to hear, is that he could not have known he was wrong. That is the trap of it. You cannot prove your depth by being insulted. You can only prove it by what you do next. So here is the one truth the range left me, and I will give it to you plainly, the way Roush gave me my hits. If someone ever hands you the smallest thing on the rack and tells you not to drop it, take it. Do not argue. Do not pull out your papers and read them your rank. Do not make the firework. Take the small thing they gave you, walk to the line, and shoot the way you were taught, and let the target speak. The target does not care what you are wearing. It does not care what door you came in through or what they assumed about you at the window. It only records, honestly and without mercy and without cruelty, what you actually did. That is why I have loved it my whole life. It is the one judge that cannot be fooled and does not need to be told your story to get it right. You do not owe anyone your whole story to be allowed to stand on the line. You do not have to explain the boy you lost, or the medal you never wanted, or the year of grief that made your hands so sure. You only have to breathe and hold still in the wind and press. I know how hard that is. I know that when someone hands you the small rifle and tells you not to drop it, everything in you wants to argue, wants to list your qualifications, wants to make them see. I felt all of that at the window. The difference between me at 41 and me at 20 is not that I stopped feeling it. It is that I learned it is a wanting part, like the flinch and the rush, and that it has to be set down before you can do the thing that actually answers it. Arguing never once changed a mind that had already decided the surface of you was the whole of you. Only the target does that. Only the work. The chief did not believe a word about who I was until the paper came back from the wire, and then he believed all of it at once because the target does not argue and cannot be argued with, and that is a mercy in itself, because it means you never have to win the fight with words. You only have to be, quietly, better than they assumed and let them find out on their own. And when it is your turn, and the target comes back with your work on it, and the room that was ready to laugh goes quiet instead, do not gloat! Do not make anyone as small as they made you. You are better than that, and being better than that is the entire point of having been good at anything at all. Hand the next one the real rifle. Tell them nobody waits in the car. I racked the last weapon that night and squared the line and turned off the lights and stood one more second in the dark under the brass plate with a boy's spent casing standing upright on the ledge beneath my name. Then I locked the door on a good range that was mine now, and I went home, and I slept for once without hearing the wire.